Happy Sunday to everyone who saw the link to this and remembered, oh yeah, I guess he used to have a podcast. Well, hell, I'll listen to it. Because that's kind of how I feel about it. I forgot this existed for like 6 months or 8 months or I don't know. I'm not going to apologize for sorry, it's been too long because nobody cared. But I thought, it's fall, well, about to be. It felt like fall the last couple days. Students starting to move back to campus. Feels like a new time. And I'm motivated. And, before I had said, I don't want to just record my homilies because, that's trite thing to do. But actually, it turns out that doing videos, YouTube stuff, and other TikToks and cringe Instagram, that has been a place to share my random ideas. So I thought, you know what? Let's actually make the podcast the homily recording because you don't want to watch a YouTube video of just preaching a homily. So a podcast is a good format for that. So here we are, 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Go. When we think of the prophet Elijah, we probably have something like a classic big beard Old Testament guy in mind. Maybe something like from the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And what we hear from much of the scriptures fulfills this image. Elijah is the one who takes on the 400 pagan prophets and slays them when their God is proven not to exist. We also saw him on the feast of the Day of the Transfiguration recently, appearing in his heavenly glory beside Jesus and Moses, transfigured, a radiant symbol of the glory of God's prophetic plan for his people that prepared the world for the coming of Christ into the world. But if that's what we have in mind, today's first reading is jarring. We have this mighty prophet, one who would later be taken up into heaven via whirlwind of angelic chariots. We have him today rather pathetically moaning about how hard life is and wishing that God would just take his life away so he won't have to deal with all this nonsense anymore. Which again is both jarring, but also refreshing. It's refreshing because who hasn't felt like that before? Who hasn't had those days where it seems like everyone is mad at you? Those times where it seems like it doesn't matter what you say or do, everything's going to come out wrong and going to be misunderstood. Who hasn't had those occasions where you wanted to just run away and start over somewhere else? I have certainly had those days, and unless you're living in some sort of ideal bubble or a life just totally not paying attention, you have had them too. So, let us pay attention to what is happening here with Elijah. He's having a little pity party, which, just for context, is rather justified because he's literally a wanted man right now who'll be killed if he gets caught, so we can let him have that a little bit. But what happens to him? Well, first off, he prays, and it's an angry prayer, but a prayer nonetheless, and God hears him. How do we know God hears him? Because miraculous things happen in response to it. But before we look at what does happen, let's notice what doesn't happen. So what doesn't happen? God does not send legions of angels to slay Elijah's enemies. God does not suddenly pave his pathway in gold. God does not suddenly whisk him away to a comfortable oasis where all his troubles are gone. No. God's response was miraculous food and drink, and then actually a further mission. Elijah asked for something from the Lord. He did not get what he wanted because what he wanted was not what he needed. What he got was even better than what he wanted. Instead of just release from his troubles, he was asked to live the words of the psalm. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. Literally, he saw food and tasted it, and this was the goodness of the Lord's plan for his life. God gave him a physical sign that even though he was in danger and distress, he was cared for. God said, "Yes, I see you, and I'm going to take care of you, not in the way you were wanting or expecting, but something even better." And we go on to hear that this miraculous food strengthened him for a journey of 40 days to the mountain of God. God gave him miraculous nourishment that enabled him to complete a full journey, 40 days, and to ascend to the heights where God dwells. Symbolically, he completes his journey and goes to the place of God. Wow, what a great story, we might say. What providence of God. But we are Christians, so we know that the Old Testament stories are not just interesting sort of one-off occasions. Oh, wow, that sure was neat. Not at all. This story, like so many others in the Old Testament, prefigures what Christ himself will later do. Now, this may seem like low-hanging fruit to say, but there's no reason why the truth has to be complicated. This miraculous food and drink that Elijah receives as food for the journey that got him to the mountain of God, it's a prefiguration of the true miraculous food of the Eucharist that is made present on the altar at every Mass in every Catholic church. From the Gospel today, I am the bread of life that came down from heaven, says Jesus. I am the bread of life. And again, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. The bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. Bread that comes down from heaven, bread that is living and gives life, bread that is flesh for the life of the world. These words of the Lord are 100% consistent with the Catholic understanding of the Eucharist. So here, before we get into exhortation about the Eucharist itself, I think it's important to distinguish something that makes preaching on this difficult. In American discourse, we are accustomed to bombastic, over-the-top everything. Everything that happens is the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. A great example, but kind of a low importance example, is social media picture posts. Hear me out. With every picture of everything on social media, if you look at the comments, you would think it's a law that everyone has to say that this puppy, for example, is the most cutest thing to ever exist, or that this sunset is the most glorious scene human eyes have ever laid their eyes upon, with 5 exclamation marks. But that kind of constantly over-the-top way of reacting and speaking handicaps us when we really do encounter something that truly is the best and most important, which the Eucharist is. And we run into this handicap when we try to describe these great things of the faith. So let me kind of go in an opposite direction and just speak plainly. Jesus really is the bread that came down from heaven, given to us on the altar, initiated at the Last Supper, and continued through the centuries by the authority given to the apostles and contained within the Catholic Church, from that time until now. We all have our burdens and trials, as we acknowledged at the beginning. We all have days, weeks, or even years when we have wondered whether it's even worth continuing. And God hears us if we pray and answers us, not with grand armies, but with simple food and drink, not in symbol, but in reality, not in bombastic overstatement, but in truth. I am the bread of life. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. He, Jesus, is the true spiritual nourishment, God literally present in a way beyond words, to give us strength for our difficult journey and lead us to ascend, like Elijah, to the mountain of God. The true presence of Christ in the Eucharist is the source and summit of all the enduring power and ministry of the Catholic Church in the battle against evil. Let us humbly recognize the great gift God has given us and never fail to taste and see the goodness of the Lord.